Thanks, Elizabeth. Sean and I are excited to be back at Future Branches and speaking with you today about something that might sound like it is going to make your head hurt with data intelligence, but really isn't about data at all. It is about decisions, and data informs them. But we are going to talk about what decisions you need to make now quickly in a post-COVID environment and how to use intelligence to make those decisions more informed.
Well, let's start with one of your biggest investments, which is your branch network and both the people that run them. It is important to understand, even as COVID wanes and we start to think about emerging from a post-pandemic situation, that the consumer's most cited factor for a new institution is absolutely still a physical presence. This according to Novantas. And it's an important thing to understand, even as COVID changed our lives, changed how we interacted, changed the usage of the branch channel. It is still extremely important in terms of the consideration to do business with an institution. Using an example, we've been tracking Chase since in 2018, they started talking about their $20 billion expansion effort that was to include over 400 new branches in expanding markets. And we're here to say the data shows it is working. As we think about some of the key markets, they were going to expand with branch locations, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, broader, Virginia, Maryland, DC. In all cases, deposits have more than tripled as they have extended their reach into those markets with physical presence and people. And like many of us, they did not wait for the COVID pandemic to subside. You can see in the pictures, much of their progress continued, mask on with social distancing and continuing the push for new branches in the market, because even with the pandemic and the shift in consumer behavior, they still believe that the branch network is a key way to gain new acquisitions in markets. With that said, even some proprietary research that Adrenaline has done with one of our super regional clients in the Midwest, we are seeing that 9 out of 10 want a financial institution that at least has a statewide presence. Almost half of those even looking for a national bank, with just 9% content with just a county-based organization. So when you start thinking about 89% of the consumer and the potential consumer really want some instance of scale, it becomes incredibly important to think about using data, being smart, building at least the perception of a more broader presence. With that said, one of the most important reasons is the opportunity that COVID has presented itself in terms of people's decisions and who they bank with. And what we're seeing now is that the acquisition opportunity is truly at an all-time high. We are at a record number of consumers and small businesses that are considering a switch. So we're thinking about 1 in every 10 is thinking about changing organizations. And that is actually up even from a business perspective with 25%. There are several reasons here. I think one, everyone has been through incredibly challenging times and had a lot of time to reflect as they've been cooped up and not traveling. And one major switch is in what they need from their financial institution. And it's not a transactional fee-based relationship. It's a partner that's going to help them navigate key decisions in their life. Additionally, the people movement is at an all-time high, both in lack of commuting. So the biggest markets are changing. Boston is no longer a top 10 city right now. And then the notion of people are literally moving. And there's an exodus from some of the bigger markets where the urbanization created, safety issues for COVID, and people sought out, more rural areas or suburban areas, and they were able to do that with many of their school and work functions being virtual.
So that was the good news about consideration being at an all-time high. Some of the more challenging news is that using data is no easy feat, and the sheer amount of data that is now available, especially to financial institutions who have more data than most businesses have already about current customers because of obviously the access to their finances. With all of that data, institutions are really struggling to use it to get what's useful out of it and turn it into action. 70%, according to a McKinsey study this year, have not effectively matched their analytics efforts with their business goals. And 75%, three quarters, consider themselves not adept at using data and analytics to determine a next best action. And really, that is the premise of what we're talking about today: how to turn data into action for smarter network decisions. So, when thinking about data decisioning, what really matters? There are some key questions that you need to answer, starting with this one: who is really in the market? Who is in the market you want to go into? Who is in the market you're currently into? Who is there? So market data, competitor data absolutely are critical to give you directional area profiles. Things like competitive density, household growth, general demographics of businesses and consumers, economic trends, all of these macro factors to help select markets and weigh one market against another and understand the places within markets generally to go. That is a must have when making decisions. But beyond that, there is a newer level of data available called a few different things. Sometimes it's called mobility data, location data, traffic data, movement data. It's called a lot of different things, but it's essentially data anonymized and aggregated from mobile devices that are giving us a far more accurate picture of really everything: who people are, where they are going, and when. And post COVID has an even heightened level of importance because there has been so much movement and so much changing of behavior from what was typical. So, right now, we are looking at an area of customer, in this case, consumers, passing by a specific bank branch in the Austin area and where they actually live. And what this reveals is that this bank branch, in this case, a potential site, this could be a current site also, is not necessarily drawing from its immediate geography, but rather a trade area that is not necessarily contiguous, but may have similar demographic traits. Without location data, you don't really have an accurate picture of who is either passing by or using a specific site. And mobility location data gives that insight. Now, where are they going? As mentioned, COVID reshaped, literally reshaped some areas of the US landscape. In 2020, more than 7 million households moved to a different county. That is far higher than normal counts, but that's people that actually changed current residences. That doesn't include people just at a vacation house in the mountains that they haven't left, or people that have temporarily relocated for the foreseeable future and have retained their original home and not permanently changed. So there's been a ton of permanent movement in addition to temporary movement, as indicated in the yellow dots on the map picture. And what this chart is showing is a change in households that moved from a large metro core or suburb to somewhere else. So what you see here highlighted are those that moved from a large metro core to a small town, a medium metro, a suburb, et cetera. And you can see between 2019 and 2020, that movement just skyrocketed out of the metro cores. And the metro cores that were hardest hit are some of the most populated dense cities in the country, San Francisco, New York, Boston. Some of it may bounce back, some of it may not, but the reality is that everything has been reshaped. In Williamsburg, Brooklyn, the average household income has gone down by about 35%, as an example, because of people moving in being of a different demographic than people moving out. Knowing where people are and where they're going is so important to align with your branch network investment. Now, what share could you really get? We've talked about this before, and this is simply quantifying market opportunity, deposits, and loans based on the demographics of people in the area and the competitive density. But the mobility data and new movement data that now layers in to this calculation gives a far more accurate picture of what the potential really is in any given trade area or submarket. So this is showing for one client how they can evaluate different areas by different factors to make a decision on where priorities for real estate selection should be. Now, then we get to the magic question of how much do I spend where? And this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
And thinking about data as a backdrop to make decisions, it becomes much clearer. And there is usually an example of opportunity that creates potential sites in existing markets or adjacent markets. That may be a renovation opportunity if there is a presence. But certainly we're seeing a new trend where people are thinking about also building in new markets. And especially as you think about the movement of people, and a city center approach sometimes is expanded, or there are adjacent markets that are larger and larger in opportunity than current markets. And there is a combination of opportunity to renovate, relocate, or actually build new.
Based on that calculation of what market share is either in and around a current location of a current branch or in and around a future site, you can quantify with, in this case, a very conservative estimate of attainable fair share within that overall gap of, in this case, what is in the market that this client was not receiving. You can translate that into investment ranges with target ROI ranges. And that can give you a framework from which to create an investment roadmap.
And often in investing, and think about this even with, with a home renovation, where to stop becomes the problem. You update the kitchen, and then the next thing you know, the living space needs updated. And so thinking about data informing those high watermarks, and then the site analysis starts to reveal the existing opportunity, you can understand how best to deploy your dollars at the right level. And we certainly believe there is a range, and the range is appropriate based on those opportunities. Starting on the left and the lowest, we're seeing a real opportunity to expand with true little spokes, which are detached ITM and ATMs. And this is available to us by technology that's now available and was widely used during COVID, especially in the first 6 months when a lot of branches were completely closed, and anyone with drive-ups or detached drive-ups or ATMs with ITM functionality became one of the safest ways to actually connect with the consumer. Additionally, there's a $300,000 example, which is largely an aesthetic change, still can be very important message, both to staff and to the customer and to the community you're in, that you're not closing a location. And so that aesthetic upgrade, a place you're proud to work and someone would invest their money or do business with, up to maybe some operational change. It often also creates a drive of efficiency. This $600,000 renovation allowed a branch to be staffed with fewer employees, but do a better job of creating a better experience with a more universal role. And it still has a similar aesthetic change, but required, a bit of a larger investment. However, data told us that the opportunity covered on that, and it would be a good decision. And then in the case of a major renovation, $1 million or more, or in this example, a develop of a new North Star, this new North Star is in a new market. bankers were hired, LPO was put into existence, a little bit of a running start. But now that team of bankers has been gifted a beautiful North Star flagship location that is raising a flag in a new community that has more opportunity. And there you're seeing the range that can, again, be repeated in existing markets or in net new markets looking to grow the idea of presence and brand everywhereness, but doing so with the right level of spend. As you think about that, that brings us to formats. And formats are really the way to think about the appropriate market approach and the appropriate combination. We've been talking to our clients a lot about branches not operating unto themselves and branch manager A versus branch manager B. It's really more of a hub and spoke team approach. And here's just one great example. There's a new market entered with an inline location, still has brand elements. The exterior is still focused on brand and consideration. We've entered the market, but a little more affordable on inline. Often with the end cap, you can still have some of the drive up adjacent, even with the technology top right. Without end caps, we're thinking about the drive up is detached. Once the drive up is detached, there's no rule that it has to be in the same parking lot. And it starts to be a connection across markets, across town and highways. And ultimately, every key market has a freestanding flagship. And that is a hub location and often works in concert with the others. But the combination of those does create the network effect. It really shows you're committed to the market. You just didn't have to do so by putting in several large freestanding hubs. You were able to support it with this smaller self-service inline and freestanding combination. In collection really does show that you're invested in a market, but doing so at the right opportunity level and expenditure level. Why are we doing all this even? How about acquisition? That is truly one of the huge drivers of the branch. It is the most important thing when you're thinking about acquisition of new accounts. And doing so with this new traffic data informed site selection creates really an incredible way to amplify exterior projection in the right ways. Bottom right is freestanding. And so the brand is backlit, surrounding the building, and it is showing in a 360 form in all directions that you've entered this market and you're there to say. In the middle option is an inline. In this case, even historical building with more challenges to deal with. And it is only projecting really on a corner in two directions instead of in all directions. But because it is in more of an urban center, the actual impressions may be higher. So we're getting back to thinking about those things that the traffic data can tell us. The demographics, the change in demographics, the impressions, the number of eyeballs, the pedestrian traffic, the vehicular traffic, that all informs your investment situation. And as we think about deploying the remotes, the idea for the Guarantee Bank actually happened in that middle historic building that was in a downtown community, and there was never an opportunity for a drive up. Now that remote drive up is actually just 2 miles away on the way to the interstate. And so you can start to think about how these inlines and freestandings are connected with those remote locations, all of it informed by this traffic data telling us where to maximize our dollars.
And related to that of the where is the who. When we have this new layer of data, we know everything about who is in and near branches and can market directly to them at the branch level, from exterior facing acquisition marketing to investment level decisions. We know how often they visit. We know when they come and what they do for both consumers or existing customers. So in addition to acquisition of new, you've got to cross-sell existing, and mobility data is allowing us to get a new layer of visitation trends, visitation in even specific areas of the branch, who is coming to the drive up versus the lobby, and who are they, what are their visitation history, what are the trends, and how in aggregate can that inform what we're marketing in branch and even direct retargeting to customers based on their needs. So all that really covers the gamut of the questions you need answered and roughly how to answer them, but a click deeper into how to use data to inform real action. And one way to think about it is about having the best data, the cleanest data, but also only the best data, not all the data, but the data you need. Having that translate into insights that are actually relevant, and having that, more importantly, lead to informed actions. Starting with the best data, just a quick overview of what we mean by best data. It is overwhelming. It is everywhere. It needs to be clean. It needs to be good data. But think about the data in these categories. Market data is a must. It's also the most widely available. There's a number of sources that have it, but you need to have a way of making sense of it. And that's everything from growth trends to demographic profiles in any given area and their change over time. Mobility data is the piece we've talked about the most here because it's both the newest and the most insightful. And in this map on the right, we are tracking visits to a high profile area of Chicago and the visitor origination of pass by, both vehicular and pedestrian traffic of that location. And so we're able to source where people who passed by a specific site live. And thus, we're able to know a lot of things about them to inform investment in and marketing at that site. Competitor data also relatively widely available, but competitive density affects financial more than it affects really most other industries, because typically there is a very select number of financial providers any consumer will choose, and understanding competitive density, change, share, branch density, and even brand positioning of competitors will continue to be everything as to contextual understanding of how your value proposition stacks up to competitors. And then your data, probably the data you're most worried about of anything on this page, but getting on top of your data and working it into actionable insights has to be a piece of the puzzle. We know it's something many are working on, but even pulling out key indices and appending, for instance, opportunity on top of current even performance, things you have access to, that's a critical piece of the puzzle. So that's the right data. What about the right insights? Well, we can start looking at things like this. If we're looking in Texas and we're looking at population growth, and this is something that needs to now be looked at relatively granularly because of post-COVID movement, there's been a lot of growth in a lot of areas of Texas. But some things to think about are not just population size, but growth rate. Houston's the largest with the lowest growth rate, although it's still relatively high at 11%. Austin is the smallest with the highest growth rate. And San Antonio has both pretty high growth rate and pretty high population. In Dallas, there's specific areas of Dallas, like the Fort Worth market, that are exploding within Dallas. So understanding macro and more micro trends is an important piece of the market data puzzle that's relevant. Now, when we actually go to site-specific visitors, in this case, we are tracking visitors over a 2-year period for the same client in a Dallas branch versus a Plano branch. And what we see here are some clear trends and demographic differences between the people using Dallas and Plano. Dallas has a higher age, higher wealth, higher income, and higher visit frequency, except for during the key periods of COVID in 2020. You see some wonky changes that happened. But for the most part, we can track trends over time to know where are our wealth targets, where are our commercial targets, and where should our investment spend be, especially to customers coming inside your branches or competitors. In this case, we're looking at a branch We're looking at where customers who use the branch specifically live, and then we're looking at overlap between a competitor branch. This can be overlap between two of your branches to figure out perhaps where to consolidate, but also where to poach potential new customers from. Visitor origin, more than ever, given post-COVID behavior, is important. And then when we're evaluating specific sites, in this case, there's an evaluation of a site, and it was one of many for this client, and it is over indexing on youth, on affluence, and on education compared to the immediate geography. This is by people actually coming in and around this site, not the market demographics in general, but this is ideal for helping select one strip mall over another, one actual plot of dirt over another, or one building over another, based on visitation trends, demographic profiles, and comparing those within a certain geofenced area to those outside of that geofence. And then finally, deposit and loan information as far as insights. This is the piece that needs to be layered in to actually quantify your opportunity and create investment models. Finally, getting to what really matters, the actions that you take that are ideally informed by the data. In this case, we're bringing different data to bear to help make decisions on site selection. Looking at the Albuquerque market, we can identify areas of population concentration that have favorable demographics, growth, and income where there are the least competitors. And so this is clearly revealing some opportunities within an MSA to look for locations. And then here's where your data can start to overlay with market data. So based on the performance of your branch versus market opportunity, you can make some key findings about where to invest. So for instance, if performance is kind of low, but opportunity is high, there's low hanging fruit in areas to either relocate, renovate, or enhance in some way. Flagships, for instance, will always be high opportunity and high performance, but oftentimes things like anchor branches that may have great performance, but not a lot of opportunity because of saturation or existing penetration or lack of growth, are invested in the same way as others, where actually there should only be an investment in maintaining. And then, of course, on the bottom left, limited opportunity, where there's low performance and low opportunity, are consolidation candidates. Ultimately, you've got a spectrum of actions, and you can weight to the right if you are more interested in investing to grow, or weight to the left if you are more interested in optimizing to save. And all of these actions in totality and figuring out what to do where, that has to be your goal.
And in closing, all that being said, we've been alluding to this notion that we've introduced before, the network effect. And that idea is this idea of achieving critical mass, but doing so with reduced formats. You can see back on the chart on the right that actually market share is not just a straight linear curve. There is an S curve, and you're looking for those points of leverage where you're actually getting more than your fair share with a reduced overall investment because of the notion of both analytically informed and different format driven cap expenses being used. That's a powerful combination to achieve that network effect that allows you to combine those micro locations, those standalone spokes, with flagship full service, flagship hubs, inline, all of which allowing you to appropriately have market coverage that allows you to have the most opportunity with data informing it all.